everyone. Very excited to start the second half of our Impact Day today. And we'll dive right back in with the next panel, which is called More Than Movies, the Role and Reach of Impact Production, which I'm very grateful I can moderate today with a very exciting, diverse, multi-perspective panel that we have. Just need to see if Anna Maro is already online. There she is. Hello, Anna. Welcome. Great. I'll start with a quick introduction to everyone that we are having on this exciting panel. And I need my reading glasses for this. So Anna is joining us online from Vienna in Austria. And she's a human rights expert. And you are curating a film and human rights series at the Viennese Human Rights Film Festival. And you attend the panel today as the representative of the Forum for Democracy and Human Rights. Then we have Karin Heiseke. She's the director of the Malisa Foundation in Germany. And its aim is to create a free and equal society. On an international level, it campaigns to end violence against women and girls. And in Germany, it also focuses on promoting social diversity and overcoming restrictive role models. In their role of media, in your role, the media is always in the center. So welcome to you too, Karin. We have Sarah Nadar. You are the editor-in-chief of Zan Times, which is a feminist Afghan newspaper. Welcome, Sarah. And I'm also really happy that Manui, you are here. Manui Tukai, she is an Amazonian indigenous artist from the, and I hope I say this right, Kalina Terewi. Exactly, you can say that so much more beautifully. Nation, so welcome to you all. So you are coming all from very different backgrounds, perspectives onto media. I would love to talk about a little bit how you use film, how your perspective is on media, and how that can actually help us to create a bigger impact and initiate more social change. If I may start with you, Karin. The Malisa Foundation researches the impact of media on society, and particularly regarding violence against women. Your perspective on how influential do you find media in shaping public perception, and what role does media play in achieving those goals?
Yeah, when the two founders, Maria and Elisabeth Furtwängler, decided to start a foundation, they looked at where they could bring the biggest impact in Germany in that context. And we very quickly came to the role of the media, because the media, especially audiovisual media, shapes our perception of the world so strongly. And so the media will always have an impact. It might have a good impact, a positive or a negative impact. So our focus is on looking at what the role of the media is at the moment, especially with regard to issues related to gender equality. And then to encourage the media to become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And yeah, we do research in that context. We look at what it actually is that is shown on television and film in Germany. And the results of our studies have shown that there's a strong gender imbalance, also strong imbalances with regard to other diversity criteria, with regard to ethnicity, for instance, age, also body shape, disability, etc. And that there's also a lot of stereotypical gender representations. And there's also, just very briefly, there's a lot of issues around the representation of gender-based violence. And we had a session on this on Saturday where I talked a bit more about that.
Wow, thank you. And if I may continue kind of with the same or similar question to you, Sarah, because you're working for a media outlet, a newspaper, online. And as we spoke a little bit in our brief break earlier, of course, a newspaper, as we know it, is very much based on words. But how do you see the media shaping around, especially, of course, Afghanistan, and also trying to support the women there and everything in their struggle? What's your perception of how media is, being used, or what does it represent, and from your perspective, and written against, let's say, audiovisual material?
Thank you so much for that question, and also thank you for having me here. As Karine also said, the media definitely shape perspectives. For example, in Afghanistan, which is a third world country, so we do have lots of media report. And my country has been on the media for over 20 years now, unfortunately, often in a very disturbing, I would say, and concerning ways. We have also been at the bad side of the news of like having always this troubling issues coming out of Afghanistan. So I think what role does media play is media bring these stories out to the world. For example, here in Germany, you get to read the news about Afghanistan or watch a documentary or watch a movie about Afghanistan, and that's your way of understanding Afghanistan, your way of being able to look into and get information. So I would just say that also media is, and particularly documentary, is a powerful way of storytelling. It can very much bring the subject in and allow the audience to engage with that subject in a very intimate way, where they can see the struggle of that subject and get to know how they think, how they talk, what's their understanding of the world. So I think it's a very powerful way. But if I'm being honest, on Afghanistan, it's often is also a very exploitive ways, in ways that they define our culture. So when you're telling a story, you're basically giving knowledge about a particular population, about a culture, about a country. So if you are not very much looking into, for example, most of the international correspondent or filmmakers, film directors who came to Afghanistan, I think here's a good place to urge them that please first start with interrogating your intention, asking why I am going to produce a documentary on this certain population, and how do I make sure that I'm not exploiting their stories, that I'm not projecting my own perception of reality of how I think they are, and then producing a story out of that. So for me, it's always, when I look into documentaries produced on Afghanistan, especially about women in Afghanistan, I'm often disappointed, because those stories, in a way, essentialized our culture. It tells a story in a way that shows Afghanistan or Afghanistan people is inherently misogynist, that they are, this is the population. So most of the time I get this question of like, all men in Afghanistan are misogynist, so like, what can anyone do with that? And I said that understanding comes from the media, and who we are as Afghan women is often very much a victim. A victim of our culture, victim of our men. And I think storytelling is a very powerful way, sometimes if you're telling a very honest and ethical story, to disrupt that understanding, to show the complexity of stories and the situation of that particular people. So I think it is powerful, but it's also, that navigation of how do you tell a story. So the role of filmmakers, the role of documentary producers are very, very essential. And if they are not careful and they do not care for the subject, for their culture, for their how they see the world, how they engage with it, I think it would be a way that they distort reality. And especially that happens when you do not show the context. For example, especially for the documentaries, often you would look at the protagonist's way and then you show their reality in a single way. For example, in Afghanistan, if you show a woman's story, you often show like, oh, how her parents, her father, her husband, or her brother is not allowing her to go to school, or not allowing her to live her life the way she wants to live. But I think that needs a background understanding of that. Afghanistan have been in war for the 4 decades. And when we have these extremist forces being empowered in Afghanistan, giving millions of dollars weapon, of course we will not have a secular society come out of that. So I think those complexity needs to be told in order to be fair, in order to tell a good story.
Exactly, and you need also the first-hand experiences, right? And choose, let's say, the stories and do it collaboratively, let's say, with the people who you are portraying. And I think that's actually a very good bridge to you, Manoury, because, I mean, you are really having such a brave fight to put, let's say, the story of your tribe out and your people, and you are a first-hand, let's say, messenger of your story, and you're bringing it. You live in the Netherlands mostly. How do you see that, and how do you use storytelling to get, you know, the messages across?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for your great contribution. So I structurally travel for the past 2.5 years. I was born in Suriname, but I was raised in the Netherlands. So I would not say I'm in between being in the diaspora and being a first-hand storyteller. But that creates, because I grew up in the Netherlands, I have a deep understanding of the European systems that our people in Suriname don't have. And I think that's very important to have an understanding of the power balance that is going on. So, like Zara says, like people come to shop stories from our communities, and those communities, our community is a storytelling community. The Kalinia people, the indigenous peoples of Suriname, and I recognize a lot of indigenous peoples in the Amazon are storytelling communities. So we enjoy sharing our story, and some stories are very important to be shared because of the oppression that we endure in our territories as indigenous peoples. But there is no experience with the context, the power inequality that happens when people from other cultures come into our territories. So what I try to do with my art is to create space for us as a community to do that in our own pace, and to pair that up with action. So recently we've created a short documentary together with Beyond Walls about the repatriation of the human remains of our ancestors that are still present in a lot of places, but as well in the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, that is a baby boy, Wayamimbo. It's a full-grown baby that's kept in Vermelite water. And that is such a sad story. A very delicate story.
Yes.
And it's the story of the colonial violence, the proof of the colonial violence that is still being stored in museums, in research centers, in universities all around the world. So that is, and without portraying violence again to our ancestors, I try to use art to bring that story to the forefront. Instead of showing pictures of Wayamimbo, I recently gifted a baby coffin to the museum for them to feel the presence of our ancestors, and that when they enter their office, for me, when I enter the museum, it's not an office, I treat it like a graveyard.
Yes.
They have 300,000 ancestral human remains in their basements. So I honor that as a place of our ancestors, wherever they come from. So I gifted them this baby coffin that is standing in their office right now. So the staff and the people that work in the institution have an understanding of what space they enter into.
Yeah.
Which is very confronting for the people that work there. And also not everybody knew that that is the place that they work in. But I feel that is the first, before we bring it into the public, the institution needs to be able to carry our story.
Yeah.
To have an understanding when they speak about it, they are supporting the story of our communities. It is not their story, it's our story. So first we need to help and support staff members to internalize that.
Yes, true. And you do that in such a poetic way through your art. And I think that's also sometimes, especially from a, let's say, European perspective, we are quite used to a certain way of communicating with each other. And I think that sometimes the touching poetry, or be it a bit more sensitive also and emotional, how we treat certain topics, is quite lost sometimes in our culture, I believe. And we need to learn, I think, a little bit more again how to listen to others' culture's storytelling, right, and how they do that. And of course, we always come from how we grew up with our backgrounds. But yeah, I think that that as you said, that you are that you grew up in the Netherlands, of course, is really good. That because you can build the bridges, and you're trying to do that through your art. So very touched by what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think what's very important that underlies underneath, for us, offering story is an offering of relationship, building relationship. And it's not, and often other cultures can come into our territories and into our communities to take something.
Yes.
Like colonialism has done, to separate.
Yeah.
And we have the understanding of storytelling is to unite.
Yes.
And to be in relationship. And because I grew up in the Netherlands, I have an understanding that that is not, we don't have a similar understanding of what we're doing as a collective. So I try to slowly build those relationships.
Yes, exactly. I think that's probably also, Anna, what you are doing with your forum, building bridges and coalitions. So given your experience that you have throughout your, let's say, career so far, using film for advocacy, and what makes documentaries such powerful tools for engaging and mobilizing people?
I think, can everybody hear me okay? Yes, okay. So first test of the day has been successfully mastered. Yes, thank you all. I mean, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for this really amazing panel. I think many of the things that have been said, I could totally subscribe to and would like to re-emphasize. I think the fact that Western filmmakers and that certain power structure that have already been mentioned by Sarah and Maui are of course also part of the film industry. I mean, why should that be any different? And on a personal note, I really would like to say to Maui, I really admire your generosity and your gentleness in which you approach very, very violent topics. So I was very touched by what you told. What we do, and I again like to refer to one thing you said, Maui, that stories are a way of building relationships. I think this is very, very true. And I think this is also true for our advocacy work. So I've been working in the Forum for Human Rights and Democracy is doing human rights research, and that is supposed to inform politics and other decision makers. So we also do a lot of outreach work. And for example, the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination of Women and Girls is, the name in itself, let's be honest, is, well, not so smooth to transport what is in it, but reading it is a very technical and very, well, not comprehensible exercise. So having films that actually help narrate the story of what that means, the right to education, well, sounds important and like something one should do or have. But if I actually can engage in a film with people whose rights to education is affected, for example, 10 years ago, there was a fantastic Romanian filmmaker who worked with Roma people on how their right to education is constantly and structurally violated by the government and the local communities. And I think one important thing that has also been said is that filmmakers engage with the community, and they do that, Sarah put this so very nicely, without already having the storyline in their head, but to actually listen to people. And I think this is a general thing I feel also in the times where we have so many ways of communicating, and this has become so important to communicate outwards. But I think listening is so incredibly important. And I think human rights documentaries can actually help doing that by already making that in nice little portions where you don't have to listen for a very long time, but where you get in an hour or 90 minutes the perspective of victims of human rights violations, but also, and I think that's very important, the perspective of rights holders and people who empower themselves. And again, I think most victims of human rights violations that I've met, and I worked a lot in Iran, they're also incredibly strong and powerful people with a lot of resources and capabilities and resilience. And I think that is something that a film can show very well. Like, I have one example, and then I finish. It's a film that was produced in 2009 by a collective of Iranian women. It's called We Are Half of Iran's Population. And this was in the time before the election, 2009, and they were trying to find common ground of what they would find important that the next president is doing for Iran's women. And the thing that they could agree on, and this was women like the Iranian Business Association of Women and very young, modern feminists in the city, students, all the filmmakers, a very, very diverse group of people, was, okay, we want Iran to ratify the Women's Rights Convention, the one I mentioned before with this very complex title. And they filmed this process and made a documentary out of this. And this film was literally distributed. Of course, Iran did not allow for it to be shown widely, but these women, and it was directed by a very important and fantastic Iranian filmmaker, the great Rakhshan Bani-Etemat, and they distributed the film out of the car and told people, please copy this film and distribute it further. And it was amazing. Like, with one of the people who made this film, I was traveling very, very much in the remote countryside, close to the Afghani border. And some women in the village said, I know you're in this film. And I found it incredible, like how you could actually really have an impact to women across the country to make their needs heard, and actually to do that in a way where women who cannot read or write sometimes can actually also understand and comprehend that. If you would have distributed a pamphlet saying, well, women's rights are important, I think the impact would have been much less. The fact, and actually, in the end, at least 2 of the 3 candidates came for a discussion with the film team, which then was included also in the final cut. For me, this was really an amazing and brilliant example of empowerment of women in the community. A very good film, by the way, that is still existent, and I think a very, very great reach of films.
Thank you, Anna, for sharing that. That's beautiful, and I think that, again, where in the panel this morning we touched upon the creative ways how you can make some impact. Karin, if I can come to you, at the Malisa Foundation, you do work with film, or not yet, or you want to, or what's you just shared in our break a very beautiful example of how you see how everything can come together. Could you share that with all of us, please?
Sure, yeah. No, firstly, yeah, so at Malisa Foundation, we don't produce films ourselves, but we engage with those who are involved in filmmaking and in funding film and in making decisions on what gets shown on television, for instance. So we kind of, we bring the research, we look at the issues in depth, the issues around diversity, gender equality, and then we engage with those who are engaged in the filmmaking to look at whether we all want to contribute to positive developments in society through what we show on screen. So in that context, we engage at several levels, also with film schools. Like I said earlier, films and images will always have an impact, and the question is whether what gets more space, whether the stories that perpetuate stereotypes and that, for instance, don't show solutions to existing problems, or that don't even highlight the problems, but that keep them kind of out of the public light. That in itself, these are all kind of decisions that are being made consciously or unconsciously, which we would like to bring to the forefront and to encourage people to make these decisions very, very consciously. And yeah, what we talked about earlier, and it really, in the preparation of today, it came kind of back in my mind, because I come from a kind of a classical, I'm not a filmmaker or a film person as such, I'm not from the industry, but I've always been engaged in advocacy at all levels, from the United Nations to grassroots initiatives and everything in between. And of course, in this work, I always knew how important the role of the media is in this context, and both with regard to kind of journalism, but also with regard to storytelling in the sense of documentary, and also in the sense of fiction, because fiction can touch us at a completely different level than any kind of journalistic or even documentary kind of products can touch us. So I've always been aware of this, that this is important in this context, and this, I guess, is what is called impact production nowadays.
Yes.
To look at a cause, like an issue. In my case, it's ending violence against women. That's my kind of key issue. And what the role of the media can be in that case to amplify the message, to change perceptions, to get people thinking, and how this can be one part of the puzzle of everything that is necessary to bring about the change, which was also discussed this morning on the panel here. And so now I come back to the point. So I was involved with the movement V-Day, which is a movement that was started in the US by Eve Ensler. Now her name is V, but at the time it was Eve Ensler. And she's a playwright, and she had a theater piece, The Vagina Monologues. And she realized that after the shows, like she performed it herself, and after the shows, women would come to her, women who were in the audience, and would tell her their stories. And the piece itself is it covers a lot of different issues. It's not about violence against women as such, but it also covers it because this is also a lived reality for many women. But the piece itself was about women and women's relationship to their body, to their sexuality in all its aspects. But what happened after the show is that women came to see her, and they did not talk about all the wonderful experiences that they had in their lives, but very often they talked about violence. So she decided to partner with feminist activists and with people from the media sector to look at how this piece can be used to contribute to ending violence against women. And so they decided to stage benefit performances of the piece, and to also allow activists around the world to use the piece to do performances to raise funds and to raise awareness for violence against, for ending violence against women. And this is, V-Day is possibly globally the movement that managed to draw most attention to this issue. Out of it grew the campaign 1 Billion Rising, which mobilized over the years people worldwide in practically, I think in pretty much all countries in the world except for Vatican states. There have been activities. And the role of media professionals was always key. Yeah. It was the alliance between activists and people in the cultural sector and media professionals who came together with a shared vision and created audiovisual material, who created on-stage theater experience, and who kind of at the same time could shape messages that would also reach into the broader society and that would encourage activism on the ground and in different national contexts would inspire changes in laws, etc., etc.
Yeah,
so the combination of everyone coming together, which is my understanding of impact production, essentially. Yeah, that's, I find it quite a powerful example of how it can work well.
Yes, thank you for sharing, Karin. And I think this is also, I mean, we are, of course, at a human rights film festival, and we show documentaries here for impact campaigns or impact productions. For me, coming from documentaries, obviously, mostly we work with documentaries, but as you said, fiction films can also work. That's even in the more earlier stages, almost in Germany here, but of course they, you know, there are sometimes famous actors or more famous or well-known directors, so that, of course, helps also. Coming to the different kinds of storytelling, because of course a documentary is usually somewhere around 80, 90 or even longer minutes, and so different formats of finding that. And Sarah, you told me that you are now also experimenting with short clips where you interview people like firsthand, and you want to put them onto your website. And of course you're coming from a newspaper which is very much about the written word. Can you share already some insights into, do you already have some feedback of how the short videos are working for you?
Thank you so much for that question. I think it's important that we have to understand that, so of course I don't have a background of film, so I watch films and I critique films most of the time. So it's easier to be critical than going to actually
doing it yourself, yes.
But I think it's very important to have the message. So because no film, no story is without a message. So we have to understand the importance of that message that's going to give us. There is one particular documentary that I watched. It's like 1.5 hours portraying an Afghan woman politician on Netflix. So at the end, one of the characters is a Taliban commander, and then there is like the driver. But my sense watching that documentary, which is intended for Western audience, is first of all, there is clear lack of care for facts, because I have fact-checked the story and it didn't really come up to the way that it was told. As well as I find the message very scary, because it really shows in a way that there is not a lot of difference between Afghan population and the Taliban, because I sense sometimes that in audience that I speak to, they say like, okay, we feel that, you know, like how many are the Taliban, like who are supporting the Taliban? So that question is actually intriguing, coming from some of the messages that this kind of films are giving. That there is not a lot of difference between the Taliban and the people of Afghanistan, which is, I think, is not true at all. Yeah. So we have to be very careful with the message of what film is going to give us and what is the message of this particular film. So for me, starting like working with some short stories, it's about very much documenting women's history in Afghanistan at this particular time, which I feel is, so women's rights in Afghanistan, the way I see it, is the worst women's rights crisis of our time. So I don't have any other country that deny women the right to education based on their sex, based on their gender. So to be able to convey that message in a way that shows the struggle of these women who are fighting in Afghanistan, who are resisting, at the same time do not categorize them as the only victims, because often we as Afghan women are portrayed as a victim. But I think that is not entirely true. There are times that, of course, you know, the situation, the environment, the circumstances we are in make us into victims, but the way that we interact with those situations, the way we fight back, the way we resist is also very, very important. So those all needs to be told.
Yes.
And so we are hoping to be able to, through the short stories, which I was fortunate enough to be following some of these women rights activists who are actually protesting the Taliban in Afghanistan when the Taliban take over. So I was communicating with them through social media. So they were going to protest, and then after the protest, I was talking to them via, like WhatsApp message. So they were sending me videos. They were sending me video clips of like what happened, how the Taliban brutalized them and violently crashed their protest.
Yeah.
So for me, it's more about how do I tell a short story through these videos in a way that send that message out that these women are not only victims,
Exactly.
they are fighting
Yes.
for their basic human rights in Afghanistan in a very, very difficult situation. It's always easy to assume and think, so why they are not going to the protests, why they are not, all of them, they are not vandalizing, they're not going out. I think it's a very difficult situation. So for me, it's about that struggle of how do I tell this story with all this complexity of how difficult it is to be a woman in Afghanistan right now, because it's not only the Taliban that you have to convince or you have to ask their right from and go to the streets and be beaten, being arrested, just only asking your basic rights, but it's also the families. So when we talk to some of these women, they also tell us, I know, like most of the time if I say this story, they will say, oh, like they're very misogynist, the families are. But I think it's always not about misogyny, because the families rightfully are fearful for the safety of their daughter, the safety of their wives, their mother. So it's not about always thinking that if they prevent something, it comes from that understanding that they are inherently misogynist and that's why they do it. Sometimes it's about care, and sometimes also it's about misogyny, and then that happens in the backdrop of a history of like 4 decades of war, no school, no education, and what happens is all, again, this misogynist ruling the country, and they of course perpetuate their own view, their own ideology. And right now, Taliban are building thousands of religious schools in Afghanistan. And of course, they're not going to be teaching secularism in those schools. What's going to come out of that is more extremist. And I'm very fearful of the next generation and what really would happen to them if the situation continues. So for us, it's like a way of through short message, because we understand like people are so tired or like not have a lot of attention to go and read, to be able to tell these stories in short video and capture a particular history of women in Afghanistan in this difficult moment, and how do they struggle, and how some of them who went to prison, who fled the country, are still fighting back. We do have in Germany a woman rights activist in Afghanistan. She's in Cologne, and she is having a tent, like it's a month that she's fighting. She organized a 12 days hunger strike. So it's like that fight is still ongoing for many, many women in Afghanistan, and even for those who are right now outside the country, they're still fighting, finding creative ways to resist, to fight back, and to bring attention to the situation of women.
But I mean, your newspaper then, of course, with the short stories that you're gathering, is also giving a voice to these women, right? And first-hand stories. And it's like, Anna, you were saying in your example with the film, that, it's distributed and it can empower others to speak out as well, especially also, Karin, what you said, that out of a theater play, something completely also a spin-off came, which was really important for the women to talk about, and they just needed to have a start somewhere. And that's also, coming back to you, Anuri, is, you are, of course, trying to change the post-colonial narratives as well, through film and through your art. Can you maybe see already that has already changed something? Is there a change in perspective and a more of a listening ability now that you've started your work?
So I create art, and I accidentally created a film. but I'm not a filmmaker, just to state that very clearly. But I also do a lot of advocacy, and that is where the change most of the time is coming from, like where policies are changing. So I was one of the organizers within the anti-blackface movement within the Netherlands. And from that, we organized the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. And that created a huge change within the Dutch context, but I believe in other places in the world as well. And that really broke some glass ceilings for different people, not just Black people, to take place and position within institutions, governmental institutions. So that really creates change, I believe. It's art and movies that get the attention of the public, but it's the action that is paired to it. So the short documentary about the repatriation of our ancestors, in the documentary you also see that we offer the claim back to our ancestors to the Dutch state. And that is what creates the impact, because it's been done on display. So the government needs to respond to it. The directors of the museum need to respond to it. And I believe that these conversations about injustice, wherever it happens in the world, belong within the public space. So it's not to be done behind closed doors. A lot of the times we should have these conversations in public spaces, so the public can be aware of what they are contributing to with how we go about our lives, the decisions that we make, and the institutions that we support, and the organizations and companies that we support.
Yes.
So I believe it's a combination of things that have impact, and it definitely had its impact on a more decolonial way of storytelling and coming about policy and legislation. But we have a long way to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not there yet.
No, it's not there yet. And of course, also this year's topic for the festival is the Good Fight, which I love, Anna. I told you, I think, 1,000 times, but I'm going to say it again. And also, of course, especially within that topic, giving voices to indigenous peoples. So, because I think they, for too long, of course, have been suffering under post-colonial, structures, and we need to have different kinds of storytelling. And I, personally find your art very, very touching. So I'm also grateful for the beautiful ceremony you gave us last year, was also sitting there with the whole team from The Story of Bones, which is a documentary about a mass grave on St. Helena, Neely really fighting with everything she has to just say, like, look, this is also our ancestors, and we need to, have a different conversation around this. And it's important, and it's ongoing, as you said. Anna. Anna gave me another really good question here to ask to you. So working with documentaries and campaigns, what do you see as the opportunities and challenges, and how can campaigners navigate them effectively to achieve their objectives? What do you think, how can we do that?
Yeah, I was just saying, how much time do you have? And I'm a big fan of Anna too, and I think it's a very good question. I think it's not so much a question that I feel I should answer, but I think that's a question for all of us, because I think it's a synonym for what is changing at the moment. When I was listening, especially Sarah, who was saying, "Wow, people don't watch long films anymore. We need to make short films." I would think that I think one challenge that we all have is that attention spans of people have radically decreased. I just had a phone call before I zoomed in with the film director of the This Human World Festival, where I'm programming the film series, and we were thinking, should we actually do a Q&A after films because people won't listen anymore? And 10 years ago, I remember this was totally different when I started doing with our students or also with an interested public. It was totally normal, and it's true. I think now people will not be able to listen any longer, and there is so much video content by now. I mean, and with the emergence of TikTok, people are used to very small snippets of films that should include everything, which of course is not possible to do what Sarah and Manuvi mentioned before as an importance to differentiate and to show a true and an honest and participatory image of situations and tell these stories. So I think this is a massive problem that we have. I think with everything, it's also and there are also opportunities that are challenges. I think it's great that that we have now technology where you can basically with your phone produce a documentary. In the war of Syria, there was a journalist collective making a film called Raqqa is Slaughtered Silently, if I remember correctly. And they actually asked citizens of the city to document the human rights violation of IS. And it's amazing. At the same time, it creates a problem that you no longer know what is real and what the context of the video footage that you have. So I think the conflicts are always a good example for that. So you don't know, everything's happening so fast. It's very often very difficult to understand where exactly film material comes from. So I think fake news are a huge topic, and that you also like deep fakes, and you actually can produce video footage that is shockingly realistic very easily. And also that I think many extremist groups increasingly discover that film is a good way of manipulating, or rediscover, because this is not a new thing, of course. And I think all Germans and Austrians know this very well, that authoritarian regimes have used documentaries. But like if you look at extreme, in Austria, they're called lifesavers, so groups that are trying to propagate against the right to abortion and to save abortions in particular. They have started doing documentaries that are used in schools, or many other topics can be included. There's, for example, was a film in our festival by Iranian filmmakers showing how horrible and evil and unmoral the Western society is. They entered it in an Austrian festival, which I found quite ironic. So I think like always, and this is probably not a new thing at all, is, and this is something that the first speaker already said, that this, who gets how much space and how do we negotiate the space, and how do we make sure that marginalized voices actually get the space they require. And at the same time, how can we make sure that people continue to listen? And I think what I'm trying to do, and of course this is not the only answer, this is just my way of dealing with a complex situation, is to actually try to focus. And I think that's something where the other Anna and I are on a very similar page. Try to focus on positive stories. I don't believe that there will be a world without violence against women or men, for that matter. But I think it's important that we narrate stories of resilience, of resistance, of showing how women have fought against the system, or also brave men. I mean, the Iranian uprising, I think, is a great example of men and women collectively fighting for equal rights. So I think my approach is to focus on the positive and successful stories, because I think there are very many, and I think in times of combined crisis, it's very easy to lose heart and have a feeling it doesn't matter. I find this discussion a very, very helpful and great effort in this way.
Thank you, Anna. I think that's exactly it, right? I mean, you are using your platform, which is a film festival, and curating a film series that has a certain, let's say, narrative and is focusing on a certain topic. So that's probably your way of campaigning.
Can I maybe add one thing? Sorry.
Yeah.
I know this just because I found it another good example, and it's something that Manouvi said about not being a filmmaker. I interviewed an Iranian filmmaker. She's working as a filmmaker for 15 years, and her first documentary she made about women in a asylum for homeless and mentally ill women. And she said she actually never planned to become a filmmaker. She made this film because she wanted the world to know about these women, because she was so shocked about it. And she said years later she realized that was actually the day when she became a filmmaker, and it took her much longer to realize that she actually was a director. So I think maybe this is something related to impact films, that people not only want to make films, but that they actually want to change something. And I think these are success stories in itself, which are amazing.
Thank you. As we need to wrap up, what is your wish how campaigners can be more effective from, let's say, an artist and a storyteller point of view?
Well, my wish, not just for them, but I think for everybody, but also everybody that tells stories or contributes to storytelling, is to listen radically before taking action, to really listen to what wants to be told, and then to listen what your role in service of that story is. And I think you mentioned that as well, that you don't have any agenda setting for yourself. And with that, I mean, you really need to be able, even if you're a part of the community, to leave your own trauma at the door, and to understand that your history is a part of your history, but not of your identity.
Yes.
So you can contribute to the liberation of whoever you are supporting. That is my wish.
Thank you.
Deep listening.
Thank you, Manouvi. Coming to you, Sarah, as let's say, the representative on our beautiful panel as a news outlet. How do you see that? What do you think how campaigners can be more effective from your perspective?
I think going back to what I earlier said about this questioning your own intention, why do I go to this story, what's my agenda? And I think it would be very helpful to question with that, because that would help you to understand why I am doing this. So if it's coming with a good intention, that is not enough, again, because you might not know that particular area, the particular population that you are working on. So I think it's very important to care for them, to care for their culture. First, you need to, as you said, you need to have that understanding of listening and trying to understand what it is that you want to tell. To have a more whole picture of the reality that you want to tell. And I think having people who are already working in that area, who know the culture, who know the people that you want to tell, and having them engaged, and not only a token representation, to just put their name on the screen and say, like if somebody say that you are, essentializing their culture, you would just say, no, actually there is somebody from that community here, but really getting their understanding into the film and allowing them also to shape this narrative, to shape this story, and also those populations that you're working. So I think it should be a collaboration and allowing those people to very much define their story, the way that they won't allow you to tell their story. So I think caring about that particular people or the story that you want to tell is very important. And because you want to be, the storyteller, the documentary producer is going to be the agent of change. So I think, so I hope that they would be the agent of change in a positive way and do not harm to that population that they are telling their stories. So that's my wish.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And last word to Karin, as the agent of change, as a partner to that. What would your What's your take on how campaigners can be more effective from your perspective?
Well, everything that has been said already, I totally agree. Plus, I think actually this is an essential piece that people really work together and are open to looking beyond their own perspective. Because filmmakers and journalists and activists and artists and researchers, and we all have different perspectives, and sometimes we don't speak the same language. And so we would, like, the minimum would be to have an interpreter with us all the time to make sure that we really all understand what we are saying, what each other is saying. Or ideally, we would learn ourselves those different languages and take the time that it needs to actually create something, given that there is the kind of the artistic or journalistic kind of perspective that needs to be, and the standards that need to be fulfilled, plus also the activist element. If it's really supposed to be at the forefront, then this also needs to be taken into consideration and brought together with the journalistic and artistic, etc. standards.
Yes.
And all of this, of course, requires resources. And what I observe, especially in the field of feminist activism, is that the resources, especially for high-quality audiovisual productions, is not made available.
Yeah.
It's not made available to the NGOs, so they wouldn't get a budget to engage with filmmakers and to do impact campaigns, etc. And I think it's also for feminist filmmakers, they have less access to budgets through film funders, traditional film funders, or philanthropy, etc. So the issue of resources, there's I know it sounds a bit odd to always say in the end, oh, it's all a question of money, but in this case, it really is a question of access to resources.
Yes.
In the financial sense, but also to other types of resources, access to people in positions of power, etc.
Yes, thank you very much, and we will be talking about that later on. We unfortunately have to wrap up here. Sorry, Anna, but thank you all so very much to be here. Yes, we'll have a quick break now. Thank you.
So guys, lunch arrived finally, so just go ahead, have lunch, and we'll be back in 20 minutes. 20. 20.
Beautiful. Now we're on. Good. Thank you, Patricia, for joining me.
Thank you, Vivian, for having me.
You've been working with Impact for how many years? 20?
No.
25?
No.
Almost.
So one thing to say, a lot of people have talked about Good Pitch today. So I ran a film festival in Washington, D.C. a long time ago where we did a lot of impact screenings. It wasn't a human rights film festival, but it was in Washington, and we really thought about impact. I left there and went to the Sundance Institute Documentary Film Fund, which was a great place to be. I was very privileged to be there. And I was there when we partnered, actually, with what was then BritDoc and became Doc Society, to bring the Good Pitch to the United States. So just as a quick reference, it's like any other pitch forum, except it's a dining room table where literally everybody that's a guest at the table is somebody that can bring something to the film. So it's a kind of visual metaphor for the partners that come together in impact. So the funders, the social justice organizations, the broadcasters, the activists. So, and that was a really important moment and ongoing initiative for launching impact in a way that gave people new to the space a kind of visual reference and a moment to embrace it. So yeah.
Exactly. And now you're working in Geneva for the Storyboard Collective, one of the very few foundations that actually fund impact campaigns in Europe.
Thank you. I'm super lucky to be there. I was with Doc Society most recently running Good Pitch programs. Took a break. I was also an impact producer, and then was really trying to figure out, like a lot of us, where to go next. This is a burgeoning field, but also, unfortunately, a resource-poor field, right? So full of potential, but not enough money. Very privileged to have the opportunity to work at Storyboard Collective, which is a funder. We fund transformational storytelling in both fiction and nonfiction. I run the Impact Fund, so I really focus on nonfiction. And we fund both organizations like FIFDH, we saw Laura earlier, GIPA, which is the Global Impact Producers Alliance, and we also fund individual projects, including My Name is Happy, which is screening in the film festival, and Illusion of Abundance. So you get a kind of idea of what we do.
Exactly, and that's basically setting the stage for, we talk about how can we get more funding into the impact field, and what do we actually mean by investing in that field. And you've got a presentation.
We're breaking all the rules here, people. Okay, so Anna is opposed to PowerPoint presentations. I am as well. I'm particularly opposed to PowerPoint presentations full of words. So you're about to see a PowerPoint presentation full of words. Okay, so this is Storyboard. Next. This is who we are, right? So uplifting stories from traditional under-resourced communities. We're working to build capacity in documentary impact, as I said, via direct grants and strategic partnerships, which is really kind of what I'm doing here, right? Sharing information, resource, supporting what we do. Next, this is just some of our funders and partners, the folks we work with. And then next, this is the juicy part. Okay, you're gonna excuse my really bad artwork. So I kind of took the next panel is about, what do we call it? Targeted investments. The question came to me, well, how do targeted investments affect impact? And I was like, what do we mean by that? I'm going to go to the basics. So the work we're all talking about, and you've heard from amazing storytellers this morning, seen some clips of amazing films, heard from artists, and really this framework is really about like, what's the structure of how we can support these artists? What's the framework within which we work? So the STAR is, we always start with a film, which is a great story, well told, made ethically in alliance with the communities, all the good things we heard about this morning, right? Traditional distribution is, traditional's in quotes, because traditional, God only knows what that means, but public service broadcasters, right? Theaters, channels, all the ways you see a film on a screen. And then there's like a dotted line, right? And I have impact distribution and impact campaign. And then the next dotted line is for social impact initiatives. So the idea is it's a continuum that builds, but it's a dotted line because sometimes these activities and the funding sources, bleed across each other. I would think of impact distribution as human rights film festivals, community screenings, all those kinds of things. An impact campaign is the activities that go behind that. And then the social impact initiative is that sort of next level. So we're going to use the same framework if we go to the next slide. And this is sort of kind of how I think about these phases, right? So how do we, what's the kind of feeling of them? What are they about? So film is the first part, commercial distribution. Now, whether or not filmmakers make money doing the work they so bravely and beautifully do is a different question, but they do live in a space of commercial distribution, right? And the dynamic between the content or the film and the audience, or how you get there, is transactional. You're paying. Someone's paying for it. You get to see the film. That's how media gets out into the world, right? The level of engagement with the audience is fairly low. It's, you're seeing it on a screen, sort of, okay, great, I saw it. And then if you think about impact distribution, I'm calling it quasi-commercial, Vivian, because I'm thinking there's some revenue exchanged within this sort of framework, but it's not, it's sort of moving its way to the nonprofit sector. And it's collaborative, right? We all talk about partnerships with NGOs and partners with activists. And then what's the kind of quality of the audience? It's an engaged audience. It's a screening like you see here where the protagonist is there, the filmmaker's there. There's a conversation afterwards that takes what you saw on the screen into a space of conversation and moves it beyond, right? And then social impact, I love that no commercial value. So yeah, social impact has no commercial value, right? That's the kind of point of it. And it is kind of this next level phase of interdependent, where the film, the actions, the ongoing work on the issues are interconnected, they're working together. And the film, might be seen by fewer people at that moment, but it's seen, for many years over time. And ideally, the change that it creates affects way more people, right? And then it's a highly engaged audience. So next. So this is just a little more about audiences, right? And sort of quantifying how we think about those audiences, small groups, shared, highly shared, and also thinking about targeted audiences and highly targeted audiences. So I'll use an example of Shadow Game, which, has anyone seen Shadow Game? If you haven't, you should. Mind Game is showing here this week. We spoke about it earlier. Khadija is the impact producer in France. So it's about young refugees making their way across Europe, ultimately to France and the Netherlands to safety, and they are unaccompanied minors. So the broad general audience was like TV, right? So it was on public service broadcasters. The next level audience, or the really key audience, was showing it at the European Parliament. that happened. That's huge. So a small number of people with a big impact, right? If we go to the next one, we're going to talk about reach. Okay, so one of the questions that came up in your advanced questioning, Vivian, was how do targeted investments in media or campaigns affect the reach of the film? Meaning, how does it get out to an audience, right? So the thing about a film that's on Netflix or even on YouTube or on any media is, in theory, almost anyone with access to the internet can see it, or if you have a subscription to something, lots of people could see it. But think about how you make a decision of what you're going to watch on a given night. Do you watch what sort of the Netflix algorithm feeds you, or do you watch what somebody mentioned to you, or somebody that you respect, or a social media feed that you follow about an issue that you care about? If I'm going over time, I'll...
Yes, I think we...
So next, carefully researched,
Yes.
and then next, accelerating change. That big star is important because it says that the impact distribution is benefiting the film. So we'll go to the next one.
And then we need to
Value.
get the others.
We're going to value. I swear to God, I'm done in a second. And then I won't talk as much on the panel. Okay, so value, this is this notion of value versus cost, right? So the value of art, film as an empathy machine, all those good things, what impact distribution can generate, and ultimately, our goal of, a more just, peaceful, and sustainable world. The next piece is about cost and then resources, and then I'm done. Next, cost. Okay, so I made up numbers that are kind of rough. Say the film costs $1 million. Those are all the things you do to make a film. You develop, you produce, post-produce, delivery, right? Then below that are the kinds of things you do in impact distribution, and then finally in social impact. And what I would say here, this question came up earlier of how much does a campaign cost, right? So these numbers are not really made up. They're based on a film that I worked on. And I would say our impact distribution involved all that stuff, and we spent about $100,000, which is not really a lot for all of that. And I'm going to note that filmmakers and protagonists' travel and filmmakers' time is included in there. That's super important for filmmakers.
Yeah.
Next. Next, you're going to see a storyboard logo thing, and then go to the next one, and that's the money. Okay, so this last one really segues into our next panel, right?
Yes.
So this is where the money comes from. We talked about media grants and government film grants. We're going to meet someone that works with the government here. Media and government funds are super important. Public service media, essential across all of this. And then you see some things change, right? So there's transactional sales, and then there's like festivals, which are lighter. And then you see educational goes across, philanthropy goes across, and brands and brand partnerships are in there, and we're going to talk with someone that works with the brand. They come in later. They're less prevalent, but I think they're important. So that was my whirlwind tour of documentary media impact distribution phases. Done.
Thank you, Tricia. Okay. Right. Perfect.
We're done.
Thank you.
You get your chair back.
I get my chair back?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
And I didn't need my laptop.
Okay. Let me ask Christian Goyny to the stage as well, please. He is with the Berlin Senate and is basically heading wherever you like, how do I call it? The media chapter of Berlin. And you are looking into how you can spend Berlin's budget into various ways. Very important. And I would like to also welcome to the stage Antonio Rosen, and he is working with Patagonia, a very amazing initiative.
Good brands.
Yes. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. And you've met Patricia from the Storyboard Collective. So basically, we've got, when we talk about impact campaigns and where the money comes from, we've got a funder here. We've got, let's say, from the government side, the funding representative here. And we also have, Antonio, with you, a brand here that has, I mean, I'm a big fan, said that, you know, the only shareholder of your company is Earth, and so hence everything goes to Earth. And you are making very beautiful films and impact campaigns with that. Yes, I think that's, you know, all the different perspectives. Let me start with you, Antonio. I know that you are not directly, let's say, involved with Patagonia's filmmaking, but Patagonia has made the decision that, you know, film is their way to go. That's their basically advertising, commercials, whatever that goes into the films, and to basically bring across their important messages. And then maybe you can tell a little bit about what you are, as based here in Germany, really doing with the films and how you work, and, you know, what's your perspective of, you know, where does Patagonia come from, and why basically Patagonia chosen the way that they are going?
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, hello everybody. Hi. So my job at Patagonia is very much focused on environmental community organizing. So that was also my original job title. So as a brand, Patagonia, you just mentioned, the founder gave the company to Earth, which means that basically the company is now owned by a type of foundation and collects all the profits that the company makes. And these are given in the form of donations to causes around the world to bring forward environmental justice. And the thing is that, you know, that got a lot of media attention last year. But actually for us as a business, not much has changed because of that. Patagonia for the last 50 years has already been very active in activism, supporting activism around the world, primarily focusing on environmental justice, climate justice movements. We always had we have this idea that change comes from grassroots movements, right? So bottom up, a community will find a solution, and that solution can hopefully scale up, you know, to protect a river, for example, or a mountain, or a forest. And so that sense of community has always been at the core of what Patagonia has been doing in terms of activism, and in our working with NGOs and activists. And now my job, and then I'm coming to stop, my job as a person who's the contact person for activists, for change makers here in Germany and Berlin, is to build a trustful relationship. So I'm sort of more of a relationship manager, you could say, because it's important. I come from activism, so my background is activism. I'm still very active in the climate movement. So what I'm trying to do is I reach out, I talk to activists, and they explain to me and to us what are the solutions that they found to the problems that we all see in the world. And they tell me what is important and what's going to be important. And then I feed that back into the organization, and the whole organization will try to find support structures. For example, a film that we can make that will support that cause. And let me just mention one example. So just a few months ago, we've published a series of short films about bottom trawling. So bottom trawling is a technique, for those of you who are not familiar, that is very destructive to the ocean. It's destroying whole habitats, and it's also extremely violent for the climate, because it releases up to the same amount of emissions each year like aviation, the whole sector of aviation, bottom trawling, equal amounts. It's crazy, right? So we were looking for communities around Europe that show how we can move past that, how we can actually engage with fisheries sustainable. I don't really like the term sustainable. Let's say regenerative fisheries. Because actually fish are so depleted, we need to regenerate them, not just keep at the level, right? And these films are connected to a petition also, a petition to ban bottom trawling, a European-wide petition that you can sign right now. We already have over 100,000 signatures, but we would like to get a lot more.
Of course. Great. Thank you very much, Antonio. Feeding into that, Patricia, you have come from, let's say, an organization that is basically the networker within the field, trying to connect the storytellers, the filmmakers with the partner organizations, because everyone finds himself, herself in bubbles. So the NGOs are in their bubble, the filmmakers certainly are also in their bubbles. The foundations are institutes, like also scientists are, and activists sometimes are. And so we basically, for impact campaigns, of course, we are looking for building these networks and these structures across all these different stakeholders. Now you are at a foundation, and of course, the founder of the foundation has recognized the need that alternative, let's say, resources are put into this field, and has seen film as a very valuable tool to do so. So what is your being so embedded also with the whole financial structure? So how do you see your Storyboard Collective also engaging in others to convince them that, you know, we need their additional resources?
Well, a couple things. One, David Reimer, our founder, had been made some money in a company called Index Ventures, became a history teacher, and then said, oh, I want to do something philanthropically. And when I showed you those different phases, I recently had a conversation with David about this very thing. And he said, and it was so clear to me, that moment where social impact happens, he's like, that's where we need resources the most, right? So let's put philanthropy there. And I was like, you're right. But coming from Doc Society and Sundance, I also knew, oh God, all these filmmakers need money to finish their films. So for me, as a person that's kind of in both places, you know, of many places, I was like, okay, yes, right. We need to put the money where it's needed the most. So I agree with that. But the biggest takeaway was like, we just need more resource. We need more resources. And so for me, part of that is for us as a community to do a better job of telling our story, of telling the story of impact stories, right? So Patagonia actually does a really good job of that. Like, people know Patagonia as a brand, as being a socially responsible brand, and people in the film world know you're making films. So the framework I presented, we just presented recently at a convening of funders. We showed a film called Young Plato, which I had worked on a while back, and is about teaching philosophy to children in a Belfast public school. So it's quite accessible, about young kids learning to think for themselves, super appealing, but also within this context of Northern Ireland and peace and reconciliation. So it's a really powerful tool for that. So we showed that film, we presented this sort of framework, and sort of, you know, invited funders and philanthropists to sort of see this as an opportunity and see a film that's been made, there's been a campaign, and there's now a social action project, an initiative happening where the film will show in border towns and in Belfast to really advance on the peace and reconciliation piece. And we've actually had some funders call and say, yeah, we'd love to talk with the filmmakers and learn about that. So that's sort of, that's like a perfect day for me, right? Yeah. So when that funder calls me and says, hey, I really liked that film, that campaign, and we get to either shepherd those funds through and pass them on, which is great, or we just make the connection. So we do both. So I get to manage the fund, but also have an eye towards bringing in new resource.
Yes, all right. Great, thank you. Christian, you, of course, from the, let's say, Berlin Senate, have a pot of resources that you're spending across different kind of media projects, where I know that there's music, there's film, but you know, it's of course a wide variety. And within the impact field, we always talk about the theory of change, which, you know, film can really help. And And I know you've been at a Good Pitch, and you saw how that all works. And I know that we've been speaking afterwards, and you were like, wow, this is amazing. So hence you are sitting here as well. What do you think from a governmental perspective, how can also, we talked about the listening and the, working together and alternatives, resources coming in as well to help the filmmakers and the whole space. So what do you think would help you in your job, and also to understand better where the money maybe could be directed effectively?
Well, first, let me say that I'm a member of the Berlin City State Parliament, not of the government.
Yes.
But of course, now we're in a coalition with the Social Democrats. And in Berlin, for media politics, we have for several years a very good, let's say, collaboration between the relevant political parties in Parliament.
Yes.
So that's what I appreciate very much. And for us in Berlin, I must say, freedom and human rights is the story of Berlin. Look at the history of the city, in the good and in the bad over the last 100 years. We have to face it, we have to deal with it. So that's why we're very into these ideas of supporting film festivals like Human Rights Film Festival, and to support activities that are dealing with these topics. So that's, you were mentioning the Good Pitch when we visited it in 2019, I think it was, in New York. And I was really impressed about the stories that were told, the way it is organized, and the idea and the philosophy behind it. So I think this is something we should support. And the other thing, just a practical thing for Berlin, if you look at the city and its economy, culture, nightlife, and creative industries are our heavy industry. Yeah. This is how jobs are made, how the city gets important and interesting. So we have some very good sides. So the political message, why we have to support these film festivals, this filmmaking, and on the other side, from the Berlin perspective, also the economical side. Yeah. That's why I think it's a very important thing to discuss. And we have a government funding with Medienboard Berlin-Brandenburg, which is supporting different kind of filmmaking. And I was wondering when we came back from New York, from the Good Pitch, that you have these private initiatives bringing all the people to this dinner table, I think, as you said it, which was a really lovely picture. And on the other side, we have the strict government funding. But maybe we can start a kind of, let's say, new level to combine this, so that you have this, let's say, Good Pitch thing, this funding, like you told us in this very interesting presentation, and the government funding, so that now we have from the state perspective, we have only funded by the state or zero. Yeah. So, but maybe we can support with the ways that we have as a state or a government funding platform, also a new way to, let's say, to find a new table, let's say, where we can also make these private initiatives for film funding and all the levels that you were presenting, make them more visible. Yeah. So that the answer maybe is not in the future we have a government funding, yes or no, but if we have maybe a little or no government funding, maybe we can help with the instruments that we have as a state or as a government, also support private funding activities with connecting people, make it more visible, help funding private money and something like this, so that we have maybe a third level of collaboration that we, until now, to my knowledge, we don't have. And maybe Berlin, as a city there where filmmaking and human rights are worshipped in a special way, we could be a good hub for this new development. Yes, I think that's a really, really great idea, because that would not. And the Good Pitch is amazing, but it's a one-time event, and a lot of resources and also thinking and organization goes into it. Of course, your idea, Christian, would take it into the future and is an ongoing, process, and people can chip in. Antonio, from Patagonia has made themselves very independent from all this and just said, look, we've got our own funding. Is there sometimes in your work where you think, actually, we could,
you know, it would be good to have a structure like Christian just mentioned, where, you know, where we could connect easier, or also that maybe, you know, other funders can come on board onto our projects, and then again, maybe there is another really interesting project out there that we could just fund ourselves as well. Is that somewhere in the thinking of Patagonia, or what's your idea?
I wouldn't say that so far that has been a priority. I would definitely say that as a company, we value, you know, the independence that we have with these kind of projects, and we also find that it's quite difficult to find, you know, other funders with a similar mindset who also want to engage in the same topic at the same time, and we're maybe a little bit inflexible in a way that, you know, when we hear about a problem and there's activists from our community telling us this is important, you need to do something on that, then we will take that and we will do it. Yeah. For example, and we will also keep at it, like for a long time if it has to be. Good example is the Vjosa National Park. Yeah. So in Albania, there is a beautiful river, the Vjosa, one of the last free-flowing rivers in Europe. Large parts of it, and it was very threatened by a lot of hydropower projects, and there was local resistance against that. And they were talking to us, and there was also one or two other NGOs, Eco Albania. They were saying this is very important, because if you let the last free-flowing river be built and dammed up, then how can you ever advocate easily for actually freeing rivers of dams, which is what we should be doing in many cases. And so we got onto that. We made a movie, a beautiful movie, which we screen up to this day. We have screenings of this movie. This is made in 2018 and published 2019, Blue Heart. Very beautiful, beautiful film. And then actually two years later, 2021, there was an election coming up in Albania, and we saw the opportunity again because, you know, people on the ground told us there is an opportunity. So we made another very short film. I think it's like maybe 6 minutes, Vjosa Forever. And, you know, both of these films on YouTube have over 1 million views.
Yeah.
So they were shared widely. We got even Leonardo DiCaprio to share it, you know? And that actually got traction in the end. We were able to screen it at the EU Parliament, and we were invited to Albania's government, to the Prime Minister. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say that now we agreed together with the Albanian government and the two main NGOs that we work with to establish this park. And I think that maybe it could have been good at some point if we had additional funders or partners on board. But at the same time, I also think that we had the right partners at the right time. And actually, if you have this open mindset and you are always networking, then you will find the right partners and they will come and reach out to us. So I don't know if we would need like a publicly funded system to do that. I don't think so. It's also a bit impractical as a global brand, maybe to rely on what Berlin would be doing, you know, or other cities or individual states. I think these campaigns are effective because we can roll out over a whole continent or even globally.
Yeah, no, I see that point. Obviously, it's, I mean, co-creation and collaboration is like a democratic process, right? It always takes quite a long time and a lot of networking and coalitioning to make it all happen.
Can I ask?
Yes,
please.
please.
Can I ask you a question? I'm interested in knowing. It's amazing they reached you reached 1 million YouTube viewers, right? And I clearly have an agenda here, right? Where I'm coming from this creative, independent documentaries that are made in this particular way, right? So not that they're the best, but that's like a thing, and they can evolve. So, and the Patagonia films are great. So is it that they don't need to be in the sort of kind of traditional or more diverse distribution systems where they don't need to be on festivals, they don't need to be on sort of public broadcast or Netflix or any of those kind of commercial channels, that it's straight from Patagonia through the internet direct to your constituents? it's sort of not necessary, or how do you think about that? I'm really interested in that.
I realize that we're in a very privileged position.
No, it's great. I mean, I think it's interesting. Yeah.
Yes, because we are making money with product, and we are a for-profit business, and we use this money instead of giving it to shareholders to buy yachts or something or big houses. We use this money and, for example, invest it in films.
Sure.
And these films they have no commercial pressure at all. They don't need to make money at all. That's why they're always available for free. But I guess how many organizations worldwide can copy that? I'm afraid not enough. So also what I would like to say to other businesses who have resources and who would like a livable planet and a planet with peace in the future, to actually look at these examples, reach out, we can tell you, our experience as a business, and make the same thing happen in their sector, in their area. Because, in the end, I think even the companies that are owned by a lot of shareholders, I think that there is a lot of drive in the last 3 years, especially in terms of climate and regenerating nature, that even these companies can convince their shareholders that that's a good thing to do.
Yeah. Exactly, because that's actually, the same question I posed to Patricia with regards to how Storyboard Collective is trying to, let's say, spread the enthusiasm for film and how film can play a bigger role in society, and to get them on board to, put their resources into this medium. It would be great if Patagonia is invited to the table as well and share your knowledge, because, of course, you're doing it since, already a couple of years, and you've got the experience with how that works. And of course, that's why you've chosen for it, because it works. Right? You've gone through the Vjosa now being a national park, and there are many examples like that. The Dammed project in Patagonia,
yes.
Again, hydropowers and so on that you helped stop. So, there are so many. So maybe picking up on the idea of Christian to maybe for Germany, and since you are here, and you are not too far away in Switzerland, maybe that would be a great thing if you could come on board as well to, build maybe this network of saying okay, so here's expertise, how can we inspire others to come on board and endorse this kind of, practice to take it into the future, because I think that politics is doing a great job, sometimes better, sometimes not so good, but I don't think we can rely on politics solving everything for society. And I think we do need civil society to come on board, and civil society includes, a brand like Patagonia, who's playing such a vital role to, connect and bring topics that are really important to the stage and invite people to come and talk to each other, because that's, the beauty of film. You can just invite people, and it's sort of entertaining, even though some of the documentaries are really tough to watch and have heavy topics. But we don't look away, and we, see the problems, and we talk about them, and try and find strategies.
May I just take up
Yes.
the thought for a minute, because you were asking about film festivals specifically, and just maybe one point on that is that, of course, we have a distribution plan that is not just upload to YouTube and,
No, I know. It goes further than that.
So there's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So we are actively working with festivals, with film festivals, to screen these films. And we will always make a big priority that there is either a change maker or activist or an expert present at these festivals who can then answer questions. Because, and this is also what we do in all our stores around the world. So that's also been a big part of my job in the last 3 years here for Berlin, to organize these events at our Berlin store, where we invite our community. And our community is already quite diverse. That's the beauty of it. We have sports people, we have people who just like the logo, you know, and so city people, we have activists and we bring them together and watch a film. And that's the magic, you know, the magic of a film where you sit down for maybe 20, maybe 40 or 50 minutes, and then it grounds you all in the same atmosphere, right? And then you can have, it's way easier to have an open discussion about it and also talk about solutions and what you can do. Because it's only successful to our mind if there's also an activation then for people that are there.
Yeah. Do you want to chime in on that, Christian?
Well, I totally agree to your philosophy, what you're just mentioning, and I think this is a good best practice example, what you can give to others who are maybe just on the way to find the right direction to produce their films and to follow their ideas, and that's what I think construction, like I was mentioning before, could make sense, because of course politics can only build, let's say, in a good way, the frame or help with the platform, but we need, of course, the civil society and also the pressure of civil society to politics to change wrong decisions or maybe wrong ways in politics also. So this is kind of collaboration we need, and making films about let's say human rights things, or what you are doing with saving rivers or what. Yes, so this is something that we could very good present with this kind of platform, and organizing this collaboration with different partners, and in the end make the issues more visible, bring better results, have the films, and maybe have a bigger, let's say, kind of society that is dealing with these topics. So also to be more aware of the things that are discussed with these films. And so my idea, what I just proposed, was just to have this platform, not to force something, to give guidelines or something like this, just to offer the support to make things more visible, also maybe to circles in society that are not connected with these topics so far, and maybe a state can reach more or other people to bring into this process. And this could be maybe an idea we could have a follow-up after the Human Rights Film Festival, maybe.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing, because I think that, you know, we all, let's say, that's the bigger idea which I'm always fascinated by, or that I try to do also through my work as an impact producer, is, I mean, we've got so many topics and issues that really need tackling if we want to, A, save our planet and save a planet that has humans on it. Right now, I have hope that we can manage that, but time's running out. And I think there are so many beautiful examples of how people have found solutions. I just think the collaborative, like, hey, let's all come together around a certain topic, because we can't all have expertises in all topics, but come around and just try and solve them together with a different experience that we have and that we can add to this to make society a little bit better, would be fantastic. So if I could invite you as well for Germany and to share your knowledge with others who don't know yet, inspire them, how that works for you would be amazing. You want to say?
I just wanted to say I'm fascinated. I think what's really interesting about the Patagonia example is because it's independent, it can innovate and create afresh, right? So it's a blank canvas in a way. And coming from the US, where we have much less funding for public service broadcasters and public media, the world of independent filmmakers raising money from philanthropy, writing lots of grant proposals, raising money for distribution, that's sort of the way documentary filmmakers have been doing it for decades. And in in many European countries, there's much more robust support for public media, which means filmmakers can rely on that, right? And we're seeing a shift in that. But there seems to be, and I totally don't understand how parliament versus government versus public service broadcaster, sort of the context of Germany, but just the question is, what I perceive is there's sometimes a challenge with the public service broadcasters in European countries to be open and flexible to that sort of partnership with multiple forms of funding coming in for films, or kind of partnering with the other sectors. And sort of any thoughts you have on that, because I feel like it's something that comes up a bit, yeah. And I don't know that you're the person to answer that, but you might have thoughts on it.
Well, talking about public broadcasting in Germany is still, or is another
it's different
chapter, let's say, because they are not. We have, as from politics, we cannot. Ask them to do this or that.
It's divided.
Freedom of press, so that's their own decision what kind of film funding, film producing they are doing, and the budget is not getting bigger because there are big discussions in Germany at the moment about financing public broadcasting and what they're presenting in their program. So, but we in addition, we have this, let's say, governmental film funding like Medienboard Berlin-Brandenburg, which is one of the biggest in Germany and also, I think, relevant in Europe for filmmaking. And they get their money from directly from the state. I mean, the major part of it they got from the state. And this is part of our state budget. So that's what we in Parliament are deciding. So we're in a permanent discussion with this organization. And of course, we discuss also how to support film funding, which kind of film funding. We also agreed in supporting more film festivals. So because this is, as you were mentioning, an important platform. And also, of course, in the end, to keep the cinemas alive, which is also important. You need the public places to present the films. I mean, we don't need only the TV at home. I mean, we need also these places where people can gather for film.
Exactly,
for
like
films,
you are doing
for
as well.
culture.
It's
It's something very important to have these public spaces also to meet, watch movies, and talk about, and have all these activities around. So that's also, I think, another piece, another brick in the wall that we should take care of. So
exactly. And I think in terms of funding, what always somehow with every funder that I've been talking to, what kind of stuck with especially foundations who in Germany have a very, they are, let's say, a little bit afraid of going into this space because it's film, because they can't really, it's new for them. But I think what helped is if I can tell them how film can contribute to strengthen democratic structures, because we are inviting audiences to come and watch a film and then discuss, right? So, and around a film you can really invite a lot of different opinions. It's not that you only invite one part of the audience. You always, at least that's what we are, as impact producers, always trying to do, bring people together with different opinions to then discuss around a certain topic. So because democratic structures, I mean, there's hope now, for example, in the EU with Poland yesterday, few, but they are fragile. They're really fragile. And I think we need to do everything we can to strengthen that. And this is also, of course, the role of our public broadcasters, that they help do that. And you are doing that with your funding. And I don't know if the time is up now. I'm looking to Carsten. 1 minute, it's up. All right. Let me just wrap this up then and have a final statement from the three of you. If you could make a wish, what would you need to strengthen the field? Like one sentence.
I'm actually just going to say thank you to Anna and thank you to Vivian. And I want to say something totally different, which is there were a couple things I heard today that were really moving for me, which was listen first. And then good intentions are not enough. And there's lots of things we could talk about, and I think I already did, about what we need. But I think sometimes listening to artists and activists that are doing the work on the front lines is more important than, yeah, that's my thought.
That's kind of what you were saying as well, listening into the filmmaker space and see what can we do as...
I take from here that we have to meet again for a follow-up to work
Listen
on the
to each
ideas
other and-
we just mentioned.
Because I think we met in New York, but I don't...
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Thank you. And Antonio?
I'm actually quite interested in what you just said before, that you also believe that these gatherings, watching a film and then having a civic discussion about it is also important to protect democracy. So I would really love to see maybe a program or something where the Berlin government actually shows support for these kinds of events, so that not only Patagonia, who can afford to have their own store screenings, but also independent filmmakers can organize these kinds of events easier, and I would love to see that happen.
Great. Thank you very much to the three of you.
Thank you so much. I have a short takeaway. We need two days next year.
Yes, I think so.
So before we go into a closed session of a roundtable in the room that you already know, we have, and I'm incredibly thankful for that, short, brief best case presentation by Valentin Thurn, who did the incredible in Germany and made documentaries accessible to a very large audience. So we listen into this very briefly, and then I would ask you all to move to the room that you already know. There we will have a closed discussion. Please don't tweet about it. Please don't Instagram about it. It's really just a conversation starter there. So the stage is all yours, Valentin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So thanks a lot. I will really try to be quick, but I think going back to this film 12 years ago, I need to show at least the trailer. Please roll the trailer of Taste the Waste.
Wir leben in einem Überfluss. Und das heißt, das bezahle ich als Kunde im Supermarkt alles mit, weil es wird ja nicht alles verkauft.
C'est imprévisible, on ne sait pas ce que le client va manger. Hein. C'est très dommage, c'est très dommage. C'est la poubelle, ouais, c'est de la peine.
Also insgesamt werden 40% bis 50% aussortiert. Und dann kommt man schon ins Nachdenken.
The computer checks the color to make sure they're right. And if they're the wrong color, they get zipped off to the side and thrown away.
Es gibt wirklich Bäckereien, die haben 20% der Ware über. Das ist eigentlich zu viel. Brot hat nahezu den gleichen Heizwert wie Holz. Von daher brennt es sehr gut. Also wenn alle Bäckereien in Deutschland das so ähnlich machen würden wie wir, könnte man sich ein ganzes Atomkraftwerk sparen in Deutschland.
Il y a des choses qui viennent du Cameroun, que je vois ici, qui vont à la poubelle, qui me font tellement mal. C'est le gaspillage, quoi. C'est un gros gaspillage.
On ne mange pas. Vous allez interviewer mes enfants, mes femmes. Est-ce qu'on mange la viande une fois même par an? Zéro.
And well, presentation is still not on, but will come soon, I hope. And what we did there was kind of exceptional. At that time, I didn't even know about the meaning of the word impact. Next. But to show you that all this needs some time, we already started with conceiving the campaign when we were conceiving the film. So in the development stage of the film that we did, in this case in the European program called the Documentary Campus Master School, we already started thinking about an impact campaign. And during shooting the next year, we already tried to build up a community on social media. And already when editing the film, this was the year after that, we contacted possible partners, and it took some time to convince people to be a partner in something that is dealing with rubbish. Well, it's edible food, but at that time it was not really, the topic was not in the head of people. And only when we had the cinema release, we were really rolling out what I will show you now. Next, please. There was, for instance, a book coming out. There was they were asking me to participate of the parliament in a session where I was acting as an expert. I mean, as a filmmaker, you usually don't act in a parliamentary session, but in this case, I was the first one publishing a book on that topic, which was widely unknown. Even there were few inside Germany, few scientific studies. Next, please. And of course, we had a lot of discussions with our broadcasters. Is journalism and activism something that isn't contradictory? And my focus was on, well, it can be there can be a problem if you don't define your target in a broad way. My target was create a debate on food waste in Germany and elsewhere where the film is being shown, and not a narrow aim to, I don't know, to change a law or to raise money. No, it was rather a broad aim, and this was also acceptable for broadcasters. Next, please. And this was maybe the core of all the impact, what we did. We were cooking what the farmers needed to throw away, that the supermarkets didn't take from them, all the veggies that were not standard in a good standard and in a shape that they considered as being sellable. So we were just asking farmers to bring us their ugly vegetables, let's say. We're preparing them in public spaces in around 30 cities around Germany and Austria, and distributing the food to the public. So this, on a local level, this was already a big event, even for people that didn't go to the cinema. But you can imagine, as a film production, we would never be able to organize events that cater thousands of people. Impossible. We're like really a small company, 2 employees. But the partners we found, Slow Food, Brot für die Welt, Welthungerhilfe, whatever, the NGOs, they were really keen on bringing out the topic to the public. And as we had like half a year, because the first partner screening where we showed them the film was half a year before all these cooking actions, they could prepare on that, they could raise money inside their organization. And yeah, we found the cook that was able to do all that. He was like skilled to cater big demonstrations. And maybe this was the core, but it was just the start point. Next. So then came the cinema release, quite successful, and a lot of partnering organizations around the Republic. And I have to say, this is more than the figures in cinemas. I feel more flattered by things like the first newsletter of the Kartoffelkombinat, which is the biggest, well, I don't know in English, Solidarische Landwirtschaft. CSA, yeah, CSA, you're right. The first one in Germany, now the biggest one. The first letter, they say, we saw Taste the Waste, and then we decided we need to do something about the state of food production. And this is the biggest thing I can ever do when wanting to create impact. And it's not about figures, it's about these individual examples. Next, please. Next, please. And maybe also a long-term consequence was that we created an NGO, and it's a grassroots movement. It's kind of really, it has grown big in Germany and Austria and Switzerland and even neighboring countries. It's called food sharing. This movement is distributing food, but let's see, there's the food banks, but they don't come for smaller quantities, so they really are complementary. And we also were, I mean, it was not just the film team. After we've shown the film in cinemas, there came people to us that wanted to be part of a solution, and we created together ideas such as these public fridges. At that point, I don't know, it seems so simple, but at that point it was widely unknown. Now they copied it all around the world, and I'm happy about that because this is an idea and also the kind of public cooking action. It has been copied and it traveled the world as in the form of disco soup combined with music and other kind of events. So we're happy that our idea has multiplied. So and these public fridges at a farmer and in a university, they are a very simple tool to reach also to people that have no internet and to visualize food waste. Next, please. So this one post in the network of this surplus Kürbis pumpkins. And 2 hours later, the shelves were empty. Next, please. Very briefly, there were also international organizations such as the United Nations Environmental Programme that asked us to do shorter pieces for policy decision makers. You can find that on our YouTube channel, Food Waste TV. Just type in Food Waste TV in one word, and you find also the English trailer. I'm sorry, I haven't thought about that. Next, please. And we will skip this film. Next, please, next, please, next, please. Because next, please, next, please. Yeah, okay, keep that. Because this is also valid for all the others. If you conceive an impact campaign, please, there is always the film in the middle. Keep in mind, if your film doesn't work, all the rest is difficult or worthless, I would almost say, because you can have a book, it can have social media campaigns. The film also should have a quality that is reaching people in an emotional way, so that's definitely important. And then there is also, in my opinion, if you only have online tools, that's not enough. I mean, you should reach out to people in the offline world. I think this is really key to successful impact campaigns. Next, please. Okay, next, please. So we'll skip this. We created another social movement after the film on how to feed the world. We created the Food Policy Councils here in the German-speaking world. Next, please. Next, please. I want to come to, because I was asked to be short, to our recent documentary that is being shown today evening, and I will show you also the trailer of Holy Shit. Please roll the trigger.
Du, ich und alle 8 Milliarden Menschen auf der Welt tun es. Jeden Tag. Wir alle müssen auf die Toilette.
So 260,000 people shit for 4 days. That's what it looks like.
Als Filmemacher, der sich mit Umweltthemen beschäftigt, bin ich neugierig geworden. Wo landen unsere Kackwürste eigentlich am Ende? Und was passiert mit den Schwermetallen und anderen Giftstoffen? Sind sie noch im Klärschlamm?
The contamination came from sludge spreading. State CDC sent us an email stating that we were not to drink the water, drink the milk, or eat the meat.
Poisoning our land will have a greater human toll. It comes down to money and politics. Using human manure is a solution. This proves it's possible to make shit into soil.
Es ist schon beachtlich, dass das vor nur wenigen Wochen menschliche Scheiße war.
Feces is in plenty, it's in abundance, which is actually being wasted up to now.
Africa is going down if we don't adopt such ideas of the compost.
Let's put the poop back into the loo. Lasst uns eine Toilettenrevolution beginnen.
Please, back to the presentation. I will keep it short. This film is kind of telling the story that the nutrition cycle has been complete in the days when we brought our excreta back to the fields, but now it's been broken because we flushed them in the toilets, in the rivers, in the oceans where we already have too many nutrients, and replace them by chemical fertilizers that are responsible for the climate footprint of our nutrition. That's the main contribution to this. Next, please. So we started to think about how can we reach out to the people, and definitely this is a topic where you need some humor. You cannot go out too scientific, too serious about it. So we created a card game, which is really an entertaining way of finding out how the nutrition cycle can work. We created a book that is actually being published in the next weeks, and we have been singing. So a singer-songwriter did create a song called Holy Shit, and we perform it. Unfortunately, she's not fine, so today in the screening she will not be able to perform it, but you'll hear her soon when we finish the clip online. Next, please. Next, please, we skip this. So these are our partners, and they do already have solutions. They do already create ecological toilets. So it was kind of easy to find these partners. Fortunately, there is already even a scientists network dealing on that. This was important for us because when we come out as filmmakers with that, so they don't necessarily take us for serious. Next, please. So we had a row of events together with the scientists, which was really great because they already had like really a lot of studies going on, especially when going to the parliament. Again, we had a whole evening with parliamentarians at the Bundestag, which, I mean, they're far away from having legal solutions. For the moment, you're not allowed to bring human feces, even if it's a perfect compost, to the fields. Only in the case, what we have seen in the trailer, in the case of scientific trials. So we still have some way to go, but this is the beginning. Next, please. And starting from November 30th it will be in the German cinemas. But today already a preview in this festival. Thank you.
For today, maybe a second small announcement. Valentin brought us a bit of Hollywood glamour to Berlin. So today will be attended by Patricia Arquette, the Oscar winner for Boyhood, and she will give a masterclass tomorrow at 4:30 here. So you're all very welcome to join. For today, the rest of the schedule. If you want to join the roundtable, we have limited space, but we do have space. Please join us in the other room. If you need a short break, that's perfectly fine. And if you would love to stay for our next program point, Katja Riemann is coming with a violence researcher called Theresa Koloman-Beck, and they will talk about the sources of violence, how film can play a part in raising awareness for certain issues, and about the personal story of activism. We start at 4:30 with that. I would love to see some familiar places again here. And at that point, I would love to say a big thank you for Valentin, who approached me last year and said, come on, we are doing that together this year.
Thank you.
So everyone who wants to join the round table in the break room, and everyone who needs a break and wants to stay for the masterclass, we are back here at 4:30.